Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, the affordability blame game. In a primetime address to the nation, President Trump touting progress made on the economy and blaming the mess, as he put it, he inherited from President Biden. Is his message landing with Americans ahead of the midterms? Also, the Obamacare cliff. Lawmakers heading home for the holidays with just days until health care premiums are set to spike for millions of Americans. Speaker Johnson says a vote on subsidies is set for January. But after weeks of infighting, it is unclear what Congress will pass. Plus, half-baked, President Trump signing an executive order to reclassify marijuana today. But does it go as far as some expected? We'll look at how cannabis stocks are responding. And Patriot Games, the president unveiling a packed agenda to commemorate the nation's 250th birthday next year. Events including a parade, high school athletic competition, and the largest fireworks display, they say, in the world. But we begin this evening with Congress about to dash out of Washington without a health care fix in hand as the president looks to shift the narrative on the rising cost of living, doubling down today on his administration's accomplishments in a frenetic primetime address to the nation, facing mounting anxiety over economic agenda heading into 2026.
We're bringing our economy back from the brink of ruin. Wages are rising much faster than inflation. There are more people working today than at any time in American history. 1,450,000 military service members will receive a special, we call, warrior dividend before Christmas. I'm also taking on the gigantic health insurance companies. I will announce some of the most aggressive housing reform plans in American history.
Joining us now with the latest here in Washington is Bloomberg's Mario Parker with his eyes on the White House. Mario, I'd like to start with what we heard and saw from the president last evening. Thanks for joining us. 18 minutes in prime time. Potentially a different audience than he would get going live from the Oval in the middle of the day. Did he win the message? Did he win the day?
Not sure he won the message necessarily, but the White House had to try to figure out a way for the president to deliver a sharp message within the confines of some type of structure, right?
Yeah.
The first outing, which we saw last week at the Poconos, didn't go quite so well. We saw the president be himself. It was a sprawling speech. It was memorable for a few things. One of them was a foot fault on the number of dolls or pencils children can have, right? Or attacks on immigration, et cetera. Well, yesterday it was a little bit more confined, a little bit more structured, but nevertheless, we still saw the president kind of begrudge having to deliver the message.
We didn't hear the word hoax. We didn't hear con job, as he's been suggesting. Democrats came up with this affordability crisis. I'm sure that the staff and the folks who wrote the speech were happy about that. But stylistically, the president racing through the copy, barely taking a breath, at times seemed to be shouting into the microphone. Is that the lack of an audience that left him in a different environment?
It's such a brilliant point, and it's the conundrum that the White House finds itself in. You put him on the road in a place like Pennsylvania, and he goes off script. You put him in those confines, and this reality TV president, and this is from talking to the aides who describe him as a reality TV president, he's not quite comfortable in those environments either. Americans voted for Trump in part because they feel like, oh, he's a straight shooter, his comfort in some of those rallies and those stages. Now, that's the disconnect that they have.
Pretty amazing. News today from the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, that the Kennedy Center, as we all call it, is being renamed. Maybe not a big shock to the Trump Kennedy Center. The chairman of the board claims he knew nothing about it.
Yes, and he's packed, since coming back to the White House, he's packed the board, obviously, with a bunch of loyalists. So, surprise there. What's unclear is a theme that we've seen throughout the past year, just a legal mechanism for it, whether or not, at the end of the day, this is a power that rests with Congress to rename the center.
Sure. Will he get a vote? I guess that remains.
We will see.
Mario, don't be a stranger. It's great to have you back. Bloomberg's Mario Parker helping to run our coverage here in Washington. While President Trump's speech focused on economic progress, as he put it last night, today we received some data. In fact, receipts he might have preferred to have had last evening, showing underlying U.S. inflation rising in November at the slowest annual rate since early 2021. The report's findings muddled, though, by the government shutdown, which prevented the BLS from collecting much of the October and November price impacting the annual figures. Joining us now to break it all down for us, Anna Wong, the chief U.S. economist at Bloomberg Economics. Anna, great to see you. The headline certainly reassuring. Do the data under the hood support that idea?
Yes, so this CPI report is particularly noisy because the survey period in November only covers the second half of November, which was when Thanksgiving and Black Friday sales were there. So this is why many economists, and we one of them, believe that the downward bias of core goods prices was showing up in this report. Nonetheless, with that said, Joe, I will say that our team has collected millions of prices covering the whole month of November. We did notice that prices are indeed coming down. It's just not coming down as steeply as today's report. But there is some truth in that trend of coming down.
The President spoke to the economy directly in that 18-minute address last night. Here's a taste of what he said.
For the first time in years, wages are rising much faster than inflation. Remember that. The wages, just look at it. Wages are going up much faster than inflation. How big is that? Very importantly, there are more people working today than at any time in American history.
Do the data support what he said?
I think what he's referring to is real wages, so nominal wages adjusted for inflation. If you look at nominal wages, that statement is not true because the pace of growth has actually declined. We saw in the employment cost index a couple of weeks ago, now it's growing at 3.5% in the last quarter. But however, corrected for inflation, it is going up.
Anna, thanks for being with us, as always. Anna Wong of Bloomberg Economics, we thank you. The House is on the verge now of leaving town after passing a Republican-backed health care plan last night. That does not include an extension of Obamacare subsidies, one of the big sticking points among lawmakers, and in fact the grounds for the longest shutdown in American history. Last evening, we spoke, though, with one of the four moderate Republicans who crossed the aisle and sided with Democrats over the discharge petition for a vote on the extension of ACA credits. That would be Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York. His reasoning here for voting with his Democratic colleagues. Listen.
Unfortunately, we couldn't find agreement, and so I had no alternative but to sign the discharge. I've signed 3 separate discharges, 2 bipartisan bills, and 1, the clean 3-year extension offered by Leader Jeffries, that has already failed in the Senate. But the objective is to force a vote on the House floor, pass something, and let the Senate come back to us with a bipartisan agreement.
And that might happen, but there's still a lot of gray area here. And joining us now with his reaction, Lawler's colleague from New York, Congressman Republican Nick LaLota, a member of both the House Appropriations Committee and the House Small Business Committee. Congressman, it's great to have you back on Bloomberg TV and radio. It looks like this vote will hit the floor, according to the Speaker, in January, the discharge petition. Do you share the view of Mike Lawler? What's your position on this?
I do. I do support Lawler's efforts. He's got his head on straight on this. We do need a bifurcated approach. And last night here in Washington, Republicans passed the Lower Health Care Premiums for All Act that, according to the CBO, who doesn't often score Republican bills quite favorably, said that premiums for everybody would decrease by about 12% as a result of that bill. That bill should get support in the Senate. We hope that it becomes law to help some of the long-term issues for all Americans' health care. But Lawler's right. We do need to do something in the short term for these expiring health care credits that, unfortunately, 3 years ago were said to be merely temporary and pandemic related. Nevertheless, millions of Americans have come to rely on these credits. We should extend them for some period of time in exchange, I think, in a bipartisan deal for some of the longer term reforms that can help Obamacare, which has some cracks in its foundation. Obamacare, in the 15 years that it's been law, has led to 1 in 3 claims being denied, premiums rising 60% more than inflation, and those health care companies are making a gazillion dollars along the way. All those things challenge constituents like mine, and we do need a bifurcated approach like the one that Lawler described.
Well, the way you just talked about that, and I know that there are a growing number of Republicans who seem to agree with you here. We're so close, Congressman. Is Speaker Johnson just a man out of time right now?
Listen, there's always time on the clock. When we get back in January, that bill will be on the floor, the clean 3-year extension. I expect it to pass with probably 230 votes or so, and the Senate will have to contemplate what it does with that. Of course, that bill failed a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week or so ago, but it'll have to contemplate what it does. Will it just shut that bill down again? Will it not take it up? Or will it provide the impetus necessary for a bifurcated deal that both solves the day for those who rely on those credits, but in the long term, for the 93% of the other Americans who are not on Obamacare, will we be able to get a conservative plan through like the one the House passed last night? I think there is a path to achieve both victories, and I'm hoping we could do so in early January.
You know, we heard from the president and have been hearing from him repeatedly about the approach to health care that he prefers. And at one point, he suggested a deal like the one you're talking about should be needed. Now he says he doesn't want the money to go to the insurance companies. And we may as well use his words. Listen to President Trump.
We have a problem. The insurance companies own the Democrat Party. They own it. And the Democrats having a hard time. They give a lot of money to the Democrats. Very little money to Republicans, by the way. A lot of money to Democrats. And they're going to have to decide, do they want to do the right thing or do they want to be beholden to the, insurance companies? They're making a fortune. I want the money to go to the people.
What do you make of this, Congressman? Because if you start sending money to the people and then they're all approaching the insurance company alone, I guess working out rates over the phone somehow, wouldn't that take leverage away from the consumer? Or is there a way to make this work?
President Trump, a populist president, is exactly right. The better method, rather than the U.S. Treasury cutting a check for tens of billions of dollars per year to these insurance companies who have profits in mind, not their patients. A better method than the Treasury doing that is to send the money directly to American citizens. I actually have a bill on that would create a tax incentive, a tax deduction, and an above-the-line tax deduction for those who are on Obamacare. I think that is a better solution to the cliff that is happening with the expiry of these credits. The president is right. If we're going to invest money, American money in this, we should give it directly to Americans and allow them to make smart decisions, allow them to have autonomy and discretion in what they do, and let them have leverage when they're negotiating and whatnot. I think that's the better path ahead, and maybe it's one that the House and Senate will undertake in early January.
Well, I know that money does cut both ways. Open Secrets has insurance PACs giving $10 million to Democratic nominees, $14 million to GOP nominees in 2024. But I want to ask you about the budget. We talked to Jody Arrington earlier today. He seems to think that there is a chance to not only avoid a shutdown, but do it with regular order, Congressman. Are we serious about this? It's been a generation.
Yeah, I serve on the Appropriations Committee. We had a nice meeting today where our understanding is there's a bipartisan, bicameral approach that we'll undertake in early January to get a series of 9 bills across both the House and Senate floor, 3 at a time, 1 per week for 3 weeks in January. I'm hopeful that everybody is operating in good faith towards passing those bills. We certainly can't avoid another shutdown. We shouldn't have another continuing resolution. Instead, we should get all 12 of our appropriations bills passed under the leadership of House Chairman Tom Cole from the Appropriations Committee. I'm confident that we'll do that path 3 by 3 by 3 in January.
That would be news for sure. Congressman, our listeners and viewers should know that we're talking to a former naval officer, and I want to ask you about the tensions in the Caribbean right now as the president announces the blockade is the word that he's using for these oil tankers that will now apparently be traveling with Venezuelan naval export. What are the rules of engagement here? Are we entering a shooting war with Venezuela?
The president is serious about securing our border and keeping America safe. He's serious about deterring Chinese involvement and over-influence in our hemisphere. And Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, has been an adversarial to that end. And I think that what he's doing on striking the terrorist boats, the narco-terrorist boats, is in America's best interests, and ensuring that Venezuela doesn't continue to poach upon American lives is also in our best interest as well. And we hope to achieve peace through strength. Deterrence is the better option, and we hope to have a peaceful transition to that through Venezuela sometime soon.
You were a tactical action officer on the Carl Vinson, I see, Congressman. Thank you for your service. Are you going to go to the Trump Kennedy Center soon?
I don't have any plans to go to the Trump Kennedy Center anytime soon. I just heard about the renaming of it. I'm sure that'll anger some of my friends from across the aisle. I couldn't care less what the heck they call that center. I'm focused on trying to make prices lower, our nation safer, get out of endless wars overseas. I hope that my friends across the aisle don't take the bait on the naming of that center.
Well, I'm glad you could come see us again. Republican Congressman Nick LaLota of New York, we thank you for joining us again on Bloomberg. It was a busy afternoon on Wall Street. Nike and FedEx both with earnings results after the bell, and both stocks are moving. Nike exceeding earnings expectations, FedEx raising the low end of its full-year profit and sales outlook, but stocks are moving in separate directions here. For all the details, we turn to Power Moves with Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick live from world headquarters in New York. As goes FedEx, so goes the nation, Romaine?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, both of these stocks, to a certain extent, Joe, are bellwethers for the consumer economy, none so more than FedEx. And of course, this has also been a company that's been in a bit of transition, really trying to get its legs back after a series of missteps under previous leadership. What they've done as of lately, Joe, is to put much more of a focus on B2B deliveries, basically higher margin, larger packages that effectively they're going to make more money off of. And that appeared to work. In the most recent quarter, I could sum it up like this. It was pricing power, it was cost cuts, and it was higher domestic volume, particularly here in the U.S. That's why you saw the beat. And more importantly, that's why you saw the confidence they had in the guidance that they gave, the idea that some of the momentum they had in the quarter that just ended, in their view, is going to continue in the quarters ahead. So you get a modest bump in the stock here in the after hours trade. Now take a look at Nike, because this is also a turnaround story. They also beat on several key metrics. They also are trying to guide people slightly higher. But the shares are plunging largely because of concerns about two key components of the business: China and their direct-to-consumer business. Basically, when you go to Nike.com, for example, and buy something, those two businesses were down. They've been down for quite some time, and there's a lot of concern as to whether the new CEO, Elliott Hill, could sort of arrest that slide, bring it back into some of the growth rates that we're seeing in other parts of the business, like the wholesale business, as well as their domestic North American business, which actually has been doing better, Joe.
All right. Interesting turn for the cannabis stocks today. As Nathan Dean at Bloomberg Intelligence likes to say, these stocks have hot sauce on them, whether they're going up or down. The president actually signed the rescheduling order today, Romaine. Is this a sell the news kind of thing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just take Curaleaf, for example, which is kind of one of the bigger publicly traded cannabis stocks. Remember, that they had rallied like almost 40% just over the last few days. They dropped about 30% today, kind of again, sell the news event, if you will, Joe. But all those names that you have on the screen there, yes, they are down today by a lot. But if you sort of look at the run-up that you had in some of those names over the previous few days, and if you were lucky enough to be at the start of that, you did okay, Joe. And, you know, the president's order, again, it gets to this idea, the changes from that order really won't kick in for a while now. So it'll be interesting to see whether we actually see a material impact on actual sales going forward. But, you know, I think overall cannabis investors have been relatively pleased with the direction this administration has taken with regards to regulation in that space.
Who would have thought it would be a Republican president making this happen? Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick. Good to see you.
Strange bedfellows.
Yes, indeed. Coming up, we'll have more on the marijuana move today at the White House with Bloomberg opinion columnist Nia-Malika Henderson. And later, could we see another government shutdown? Nick LaLota doesn't think so. But we'll discuss with a Democratic lawmaker coming up straight ahead on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
I was honored by it. The board is a very distinguished board, most distinguished people in the country. And I was surprised by it, and I was honored by it. You know, we're saving the building. We saved the building. The building was in such bad shape, both physically, financially, and every other way, and now it's very solid, very strong.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington, where we heard from President Trump a short time ago there, responding to news that the Kennedy Center, the board at the Kennedy Center, unanimously voted to change the name to the Trump Kennedy Center. It should be noted legally its name remains the Kennedy Center, after Congress established the living presidential memorial through federal law more than 60 years ago. Joining us now with her reaction to this and a lot more is Bloomberg opinion columnist Nia-Malika Henderson, live with us here in Washington. It's great to see you. Tickets were already having some trouble there after the president dispatched the board, made himself chairman. A number of touring groups canceled. Is this going to make it worse?
Yes, it absolutely is going to make it worse. They were already down 50% year over year. Shows canceled. Alvin Ailey, for instance. Right. Hamilton. Also pulling out. So this isn't good. You know, and the important thing to note, I think you led with it, which is this is by law named the John F. Kennedy Center, and it's a living memorial. It's like changing the Lincoln Memorial to the Trump Lincoln Memorial or something.
Well, we'll see.
I know. We'll see. So this was something he sort of joked about when he hosted the Kennedy Center, and this was something that people in Congress and the House, they put forward bills to rename it, to rename the Opera House, the Melania Trump Opera House. Also, that wouldn't be legal. So we'll see. I mean, this is, it's kind of like the Department of War. It's kind of like, what is it, the Gulf of America now? There are all of these sort of renaming attempts happening. But, I don't suspect this will really go anywhere. They're not going to change the name on the building. But listen, we'll see.
Well, yeah, and they just might.
Yeah, they just might.
We'll see about that. It could take some time to remake all the stationery in a couple of years. But I want to ask you about what the president was up to today on a policy standpoint. He signed an executive order and surrounded himself in the Oval Office by pro-cannabis activists, largely medical marijuana activists, some of them wearing lab coats, which was interesting optics, to reschedule cannabis. This is something he floated on the campaign trail, but is undoing generations of Republican orthodoxy in the process. Who is this for?
Listen, I think it's for some of these MAGA folks. I think it's for some of his donors, quite frankly. I think for if you're in a state where it's legal, the fact that now it is changed its classification, this is going to mean something financially now because you can write down expenses in a way because of this classification. So I think it'll mean something for these businesses that are popping up. And they're doing quite well in these states. So, but it is quite a shift, and it'll be sort of a further destigmatization around cannabis use, I think. But it is a little bit surprising to see a Republican president do this. But again, this is a Republican president that has a sort of mixture of ideologies, a mixture of in terms of his base and who are the folks who voted for him, working class folks, African Americans, men in particular. The sort of podcast bros and the manosphere. So I think there'll be a lot of...
Stone, while we're at it.
That's right.
In our remaining moment, you've surely watched the president in prime time last evening. He wasn't talking about this. He was talking about affordability. To a different crowd. This wasn't, I'm guessing, the MAGA base sitting at home watching the finale of Survivor and suddenly Donald Trump's on your TV set in prime time. Did he succeed in delivering the message?
I think once you start to get to thinking that this is a messaging problem, thinking that you can sort of message reality, it's a problem, right? You can't really reframe people's actual experiences of higher prices. We see some prices coming down. He talks about eggs, for instance. But overall, if you go Christmas shopping, the prices are a little bit higher. I got some Omaha steaks for my in-laws. They were a little bit higher this go round.
You know how to treat the in-laws. I'm still trying to figure out, why was he yelling? I don't. He was shouting. He was not happy. He did not want to give this speech. Apparently, he was forced to give it by CC ran through it. 18 minutes on a speedboat. Nia, great to have you. Nia-Malika Henderson, only here on Bloomberg. Coming up, health insurance costs set to soar for millions of Americans. We'll address the cliff next on Bloomberg.
Why is Mike Johnson and House Republicans leaving town when there is legislation supported by a bipartisan majority of the House that would extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years? We should pass that bill and then send it over to the Senate before the end of the year, before the Affordable Care Act tax credits expire.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew. That, of course, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who was speaking this afternoon about last night's passage of the Republican plan for health care, the proposed bill that does not include an extension of Obamacare subsidies. That passage coming, of course, after 4 moderate Republicans joined Democrats separately here to force a vote to extend the ACA credits for 3 years. That vote set to take place sometime next month. That's the way a discharge petition works. And joining us now to break down what comes next on Capitol Hill is Bloomberg's Erik Wasson. It's great to see you, Erik. You've been in the middle of this now for weeks and going back before it even caused a shutdown. It feels like we've got a half dozen bills here, some of them discharge petitions. Others are bills waiting to get to the floor. Is there a world in which lawmakers return in January and actually craft a deal?
I think there could be. I talked to Senate Majority Leader John Thune about this, and he actually said he was looking forward to a compromise emerging. It would have to have reforms. He says the 3-year clean extension that the Democrats' discharge petition would set up is dead on arrival in the Senate. But if there are reforms, if there's some way to incorporate Republican ideas, he'd be in favor of it. He talked about people in South Dakota, where he is from, being affected by this. But Democrats certainly feel that they're in a win-win position. Jeffrey's in that press conference says this is the Titanic for the Republican Party. Either they get a win on this, force an extension of the ACA, or they take it to the voters in 2026 and really make it a centerpiece of their campaign. Mike Johnson, on the other hand, is preparing to go to the voters and say Obamacare itself is broken and Democrats are responsible for 15 years of health care increases. So that's really setting the table for next year's campaign. We had Nick LaLota on air. I just talked to him off the camera, and he said Johnson's engaging with the moderate Republicans on trying to turn off this discharge petition, maybe offer them a vote, which they were originally seeking, on a compromise by Brian Fitzpatrick, which would extend it for 1 or 2 years in exchange for some income limits and other reforms. So this is very much a live ball. They'll be talking over the Christmas break, potentially coming back and doing some quick action to turn off the discharge petition through a rule and getting a vote on a Republican plan. So there's a lot of different options here. There is a chance, but as Thune said, it's not likely, it's not impossible, it's somewhere in between. I think that's about right.
That's really interesting, and that's pretty big news. Just to quickly, Erik, if that discharge petition was turned off, would the bill get a vote in January still the same?
No, it would not. The discharge petition can be turned off by a rule, but moderates would only vote for that procedure if they got a vote on their own preferred plan.
Got it. Great reporting. Erik Wasson, thank you so much. Live on Capitol Hill on the front lines for Bloomberg. Today on the early edition of Balance of Power, we spoke with another member of the Republican Conference, Congressman Jody Arrington of Texas, who's in fact chair of the House Budget Committee. Talked about the prospect of another shutdown when Congress returns in January. Here's what he said.
I don't think that Democrats and Republicans are going to be able to work together. I think many of the Democrats, not all, but the leadership wants health care to be a wedge issue for November. There are others who want to actually address it. We have different ideas on that. But Republicans have the tool that actually Democrats use to create these COVID-era subsidies called budget reconciliation. It gives us the simple majority in the Senate, so we don't need Democrat support. We did that with the big, beautiful bill. Let's do it to make health care affordable. Health care's got to be addressed, and I think the only way to do it, Joe, unfortunately, because I think it's better when we can work together, but we shouldn't apologize for using reconciliation and having taking a unilateral approach as Republicans if we believe in our policies, and I certainly do.
So the chairman throws a whole new log on the fire. We wait to do it in reconciliation in the new year. Joining us now with her reaction to a menu of options, Democratic Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury of New Mexico, who's live on the Hill, a member of the House Oversight Committee. Congresswoman, it's great to see you. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. Do you support Hakeem Jeffries in suggesting that lawmakers stay in town to get this done before we go over the cliff?
Yeah, absolutely. I am still here in Washington, D.C. at our nation's capital, and I think it's reprehensible that the speaker not only sent his members home, but canceled votes tomorrow. We're literally 1 week away from Christmas, and he had the opportunity to extend the Obamacare Affordable Care Act extension for millions of American families, and instead he canceled votes and sent his members home to go celebrate with their families while millions of Americans will lose their health care. So I believe we should stay here, get it done, and make sure that Americans can access health care.
Of course, what you believe and what you want, Congresswoman, is not necessarily going to be on Speaker Johnson's agenda, and it looks like we are going over the cliff. We come back in January, And I'm curious what you think happens in that scenario, because you've got the discharge petition. We've got the Fab Four on there already, and maybe there are more Republicans who sign on. But then you've got the Senate to deal with. Could there be a gang of 8 or a gang of 6 that comes from the discharge if it shows there's enough momentum here?
Yeah, absolutely. So the discharge petition will require that within 7 days of ripening of this petition, which basically, I know it's very complicated, puts us on January 6th for a vote on the House extension, which is a 3-year extension. That's the day we come back from the holiday recess. We expect that will be available to be brought to the floor that week. I think this changes the dynamic with the Senate dramatically, and I think it basically will require that the American people speak loud and clear to the Senate that they demand an extension so that millions of people don't get kicked off of their insurance. So yes, we could see a shift in the Senate, but I think it will require the American people speaking out and speaking loudly on that.
Interesting. Where are you on this idea of a shutdown potentially at the end of January if a deal is not struck, Congresswoman? I know there's a lot of scar tissue from that last shutdown, and Chuck Schumer today was indicating that he does not think that's a vehicle to apply more leverage. How about you?
You know, I think that all shutdowns are damaging. My background is actually as a budget analyst, a policy and budget analyst. I worked at OMB during the Obama administration. Shutdowns are harmful, and coming from a state that has a high proportion of federal militaries and active duty, federal employees in active duty military, it's devastating to our communities. So we never want a shutdown. But what I will say is that the Republicans shut down the House for weeks and weeks and weeks and promised that when we came back, they would allow a vote on health care and that they would pass appropriations bills. And here we are a week before Christmas, and they've done neither. They haven't passed a health care bill, and they have not passed appropriations bills. And so ultimately, this is on them. They control the chambers, they control the presidency, and we need a serious commitment to actually keeping the government open, operational, and serving the American people.
Well, to your point, we're a week out from Christmas, which means tomorrow is deadline day for the Department of Justice to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. Congresswoman, I know you serve on the Oversight Committee, and I would love to ask you about some of the decisions you've made on that committee. But do you expect the DOJ will make good on this or find a reason not to release them?
Well, I know what the law says, and the law says that they have to comply by tomorrow. We have seen zero signs of compliance so far, but they have essentially until midnight tomorrow. And I think it's important for anyone that doesn't know what's in the act that was passed by Congress and signed by Trump. They have to release all DOJ files, all the FBI files, and the U.S. Attorney files. We know it is a voluminous and vast amount of information. It not only has to be released to Congress, it needs to be released publicly and searchable. And so we'll know by midnight tomorrow if they have released those files, and if they have not, we will have to look at what kind of compliance tools we can use as Congress.
Wow. Well, this is going to redefine a Friday news dump, Congresswoman. I'm curious about the process that you've been through on the Oversight Committee, because you've been putting out hundreds, thousands, in fact, documents, photographs, and so forth. And there was another release of more photos just today. How does the committee discern which photographs to release and when?
Yeah, so the committee's investigation, which was initiated in August after Democrats made a motion to subpoena the Epstein files from the administration, from the estate, and subpoena a number of witnesses in this case. And the Republicans agreed to that vote. And so we have a bipartisan investigation is of the entire case. So this is much larger than just the disclosure of DOJ's files. It also now includes subpoenas that we've issued of financial institutions, which we know were complicit in not reporting financial transactions that may have been implicated in Epstein's crimes. And so as those documents are coming in pursuant to the subpoenas, the committee is processing them. And in the case of the last 3 tranches of documents that we've received from the estate, they were released in their entirety to the public. But last week on Thursday, the estate transmitted 95,000 photographs that came from Jeffrey Epstein's emails and iCloud account. And because of the nature of those photographs, some of which include potential photographs of victims as well as sex acts, The committee is undergoing a review process, talking to survivors to determine what is appropriate for disclosure for transparency purposes, but also to protect the identities and the safety of the victims as well.
Well, this is going to be quite a moment. I don't know what you think Americans should prepare for based on what you've seen, Congresswoman, but his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, told Vanity Fair in a rather casual interview or series of interviews that she's read the files. She's actually seen them, and Donald Trump's name is in them, but said that they show no untoward activity. Is that what you expect to see?
I don't know what we'll see tomorrow. We don't know if they're going to release all the files. We don't know if they're going to try to redact the files. We know that at some point Donald Trump said he was going to remove all mention of Republicans, probably including himself. So we don't know what they're going to release. We know what the law requires. But listen, we all know that Donald Trump was friends with Jeffrey Epstein for over a decade. We know from the estate's emails that they released from Jeffrey Epstein's own hands that he typed on a keyboard that he stated that Donald Trump knew about the girls in reference to young women that were recruited at Mar-a-Lago and came to his house. And he talks about in those emails and texts of having photographs of Donald Trump with young women. I mean, whether or not that is investigated and in the Department of Justice's files, we don't know. But what we do know is that they have a long association, and we know that the president has been actively engaged in a cover-up. He's threatened members of Congress. He tried to stop the discharge petition from moving forward, and he has tried at every single moment to bury this case and to distract the American people. And so all of that raises questions. What is he hiding if he doesn't want the American people to know what's in there?
Well, maybe we'll start getting some more answers tomorrow, Congresswoman. Thank you for joining us. Melanie Stansbury, the Democrat from New Mexico, here on Bloomberg. Breaking news just out. TikTok signing agreements to sell its U.S. arm into a joint venture. We've got details coming up with our Bloomberg reporters and with our political panel, all coming up straight ahead here on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew with breaking news this evening, a major development regarding TikTok. Yeah, the company telling employees in a memo today that the social media app's parent company, ByteDance, has signed a series of binding agreements to create a U.S. joint venture that will be majority owned by American investors. TikTok CEO telling employees, quote, TikTok Global's U.S. entities will manage global product interoperability and certain commercial activities, including e-commerce, advertising, and marketing. Joining us now to discuss the impact of this move, the man who's all over this story and has been for months, Bloomberg's Michael Shepard. Shep, what does this mean in terms of the countries involved in the politics behind this? Should we assume Beijing has signed off?
Well, we shouldn't assume anything based on that, because this memo that was circulated to TikTok employees by Xiao Chu, the CEO, there was no mention of China. It did make extensive mention of President Donald Trump's executive order from September 25th, really clearing the way for this deal to go through and giving his blessing, the U.S. imprimatur, on this transaction, and also codifying in a way some of the security guarantees that would be baked in and enforced by one of the investors, and that is Oracle Corp, who, of course, is very close to the president for a lot of other things and is involved in the AI agenda as well.
Is the rest of this investment group the same names that we've been hearing since the president rolled this out?
That's a great question, Joe, because a lot of people have been wondering who will end up as the TikTok owners. And it really is the same trio coming in as new investors, including Oracle, but also Silver Lake Management and the Abu Dhabi investment firm MGX. So it will be pretty much the contours that we had seen. ByteDance, the Chinese owner that currently controls the app, its stake will be diluted down to 19.9%, which would comply with the U.S. law mandating a sale. And then we would also see ByteDance's existing investors, many of them whom our American investors, like Jeff Yass of Susquehanna, they would get a 30% stake. So altogether, you would see ByteDance's control of the company shrink below the legal threshold. And yet the security guarantees are going to be one of the big questions out there. And the other will be, has China signed off on this as well? And we are waiting to see what Beijing will say, and if it has been part of the trade conversation.
That would be a huge development. Did they get the algorithm, by the way? Did they lease the algorithm? They borrow the algorithm?
Well, that is another thing that is in the deal that may not satisfy U.S. lawmakers.
Okay.
The idea was to have the algorithm completely separate, perhaps even recreate it from scratch. Instead, the idea is that it would be a copy leased from ByteDance, but then retrained to some degree or another by Oracle and also walled off in a way. They would create some sort of a security firewall or barrier that would keep ByteDance from ever gaining access to U.S. data or to the algorithm itself out of concerns that there could be some manipulation going on.
Pretty complicated deal, which I guess is why we've been talking about it for so long. I suspect we'll update this tomorrow with you, and I hope that you'll have more for us. Shep, thank you. That's Michael Shepard live in Washington as we assemble our political panel now for their reaction to this story and more. We're joined by Bloomberg Politics contributor and Democratic strategist Adam Hodge, managing director at Bully Pulpit International, alongside Republican strategist Annalise Keller, partner at 7 Letter. Great to have both of you with us. Adam, based on your experience in the USTR's office, I'm just curious, your thoughts on this deal. Complicated, yes. Is it possible to keep the Chinese out? Do you trust it?
Joe, I just think back to what Xi Jinping has said himself, was that TikTok would never be sold. And in China, Xi Jinping tends to get his way when he says that certain things should happen a certain way. So the Congress is pretty clear what the law should be here. The president has clearly flouted that over the course of this year and saying he's going to do a deal, giving waivers to some companies that seem to contradict the actual law that was signed. I think I should go back to TikTok. Has clearly been a very effective partner in Washington trying to get their way. They've done an effective lobbying on this issue. The devil, as Shep was saying, will be in the details. That is 100%, because if how it is structured, whether the source code, whether the algorithm stays in the U.S., really does matter at the intent and spirit of that law that was passed.
Statement from Chu this evening says the organization will, quote, operate as an independent entity with authority over U.S. data protection, algorithm security, content moderation, and software assurance. Annalise, do you trust the framework that you're hearing?
That'll be hard. I mean, we'll have to see more, and everyone here in the U.S. will have to, be able to trust that some of the data and privacy security issues are solved. But, so I think that's an open question. But what is clear is that President Trump, and especially going into the midterms, has, been effectively, it's been effectively argued to him that this is something that this is a platform that lawmakers are on. It's an effective tool for them to reach their constituencies. And I think that's really what was able to turn the tide of lawmakers here in Washington appreciating that this was something that their constituencies used in a way that they could communicate with them back home.
Interesting. We're going to have a lot more on this, I'm sure, as we learn more. This just broke after we came to air. But I do want to ask you both about the health care debate that's punctuated a lot of conversation this hour over the course of the day. And, well, I guess it's been months, because we did have the longest government shutdown in history. We heard from Hakeem Jeffries, knowing that he's got enough Republicans on the discharge petition now to get this thing to the floor and actually clear an extension of Obamacare subsidies. Here's what he said.
Our message to Mike Johnson is clear. You can run, but you cannot hide. The American people are horrified. Republican leaders are petrified. But House Democrats are unified, standing up on behalf of the American people to protect their health care.
Adam Hodge, Leader Jeffries is demanding that the Speaker keep everyone in town, and I guess John Thune as well for that matter, to get this done before Christmas. Surely he's not new to Congress. No one's missing their flyout day tomorrow, right?
No, Joe. I mean, I think the way that you nailed it, the way the House works, that seems unlikely. However, it sure would be in the Republicans' political interests to solve this problem before they went away for the holidays. I mean, you could see their own reelection ads running themselves, saying, "I stayed in Washington to get this done to lower your healthcare premiums." Instead, like they're going to fly out of town, and there's no way that they address this in January. And in January, as they're suffering from this affordability crisis of some of their own making, they're going to have to deal with skyrocketing premiums. It boggles my mind that they haven't found a way to solve this political problem when you have members of their caucus who are the most endangered trying to actually get a deal. And it would be good for the American people if they did solve this problem.
Annalise, where's your head on this? Because it does seem like you've got the ingredients for a deal, but we're going over the cliff anyway, and everybody's going to come back in January and start pushing the rock. Couldn't we get this done now?
Well, I'll disclose that I work on this issue in my day job, but you're right. You're right on. You know, Republicans appreciate that this is going to be a challenge for them when it comes to affordability and the midterms. You know, I worked for an endangered Republican in the 2018 cycle in Detroit suburbs, and we were part of that landslide, the blue wave that lost re-election because of the pre-existing condition conversation. Democrats were really successful in pushing that narrative, and healthcare is an issue that the American people really do trust Democrats on. You know, Republicans are typically stronger on the economy. Democrats typically are stronger on health care. So I think there are a lot of Republicans who realize that this is a really challenging place for them to be in and a really huge vulnerability. And that's why you have seen everyone coming out with their own plan. You know, this is my plan. And, you know, because people want to solve this problem. But what it takes is leadership in the House of Representatives and in the United States Senate to put these bills on the floor. You know, also, the last thing I'll say is the 3-year clean extension. I think people know that that's not going anywhere.
Failed already in the Senate.
It's already failed. You know, I think it was really remarkable to see Republicans get on the discharge petition. I think that was a real rebuke of the leadership in the House right now. But there has got to be some sort of you know, real decision from leadership in the Republican Party that they're going to move something forward.
This is an important moment for sure that we'll be looking back on at some point. Adam, I know you like a party, and it looks like the president's planning one. Have you heard about Patriot games? This is not to be confused with Hunger Games. Kate Sullivan at Bloomberg out with this story. The president announcing a bunch of events to celebrate America's 250th birthday, including Patriot Games will be a parade and athletic competition for high schoolers, a fair on the National Mall, and what they say will be the biggest fireworks display in the world. What's the president doing making plans like this right now while we're talking about affordability? Don't we have a ballroom to build?
Well, I'll tell you, the one who's not happy about those fireworks is my dog, who's going to be going crazy on 4th of July when the fireworks are going off. But I think you have, this is in keeping with the administration, right? They had the secretary doing pull-ups in the DCA. This is, you know, this kind of in keeping with some of the shenanigans that they've been up to. It seems to me, you're right on the political side. If you have a budget problem, you got an affordability problem, spending hundreds of millions of dollars on fireworks in the parade.
I thought,
Annalise?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll try to make it. I thought this was AI when I saw it.
I'll meet both of you guys there. Adam Hodge, Annalise Keller, thank you. This is Bloomberg.